The following content is provided by MIT OpenCourseware under a Creative Commons license. Additional information about our license and MIT OpenCourseware in general is available at ocw.mit.edu.
Okay, let's begin. In the reflective practice, the idea is how a professional deploys all his capacities for solving problem or for generating knowledge. And he has a pool of resources, and he should be able to tap on these resources and use in concrete situations. So what we will do today is to talk about some of these resources that a professional may use. Okay?
Just a quick question. Why is it so important to say a professional and not just,
okay, a person, a practitioner.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Or not even for practitioners, but like in other contexts, like a parent. Why is it so important that it's a professional?
The only reason is that it's the word that currently have been used in reflective practice, but there is no other reason.
Right. That's why I was asking, because I couldn't put my hands on that.
Okay. Which words?
Just just wondering if there was an intent that I was missing.
No. It's okay. I use professional in a more general sense, and any person who is working with some concrete issue, object, okay.
So it can be anything,
any person,
issue,
yes.
any context.
Can be any context. I was not thinking about people who is painting, no, but in general, in any situation. I am not sure about the main characteristics that happen in the mind of a painter when he is painting. Okay? Yeah. We have some examples of knowledge generation. The idea today is only to walk through some of these modalities of generating knowledge. Is not to analyze them in a deeply, but only to remember the main characteristic of each one of this process. Okay? Can we go? No. It's okay. Just for your information, no? Experimentation, speculation, imagination, story cycle, scientific method, statistical analysis, the psychosessi. I will explain what is psychosessi after. Modeling, Delphi, reframing, conceptual innovation, design. And maybe others ways for generating knowledge. Experimentation. Most of the time in the human history, we have learned and we have generate knowledge through experimentation. What's particular from experimentation? I do something, or I may begin designing, imagine something. I make an experiment, and I evaluate the results. Once I have evaluated the results, I change my model I change the design I have made, and I try a new experiment. For example, a peasant in his work producing maize or some other crop. He plants, activity, he take care of the crop during the year, and after that he harvests, okay? And he tried to analyze the reason why the productivity was higher or slower. The main effort is to get results. It's not to learn in itself. He is interested in the productivity of the crops. He will feel very happy if he finds in some way how to produce more crops per hectare. If he discovers something, he will be happy too. But if the productivity was low this year, he will not be satisfied with what he have learned. Okay, the main purpose is not learning. The main purpose is to get concrete results. Learning something that happens in between. Okay? May occur abstraction. Some people are more able to abstract than others. They may have an abstract model about how the crop evolves. Or he may not have this idea in his mind. But the construction of an abstract model is not a phase in the process. He seeks in some things of, he abstracts some ideas in the effort for planning what he will do. Yeah? It's not clear? Okay. Let's come back. Okay. The compass, the paper, the powder, the guns, all these were invented with this method. Okay? It was the main intellectual resource we have had, methodological resource, until the 17th century. Okay? The other great way created for generating knowledge is speculation. It's very ancient too. The most important is the invention of the theorem. It's Thales, the Greek, 5 centuries before Christ. And they organized a method for speculate. Okay? If A, then B. And they create a method for prove B. So all the conversation among them were organized in this form. It was very important because it made possible the development of mathematics during the period of the Greeks, and philosophy too. We are speculating when we are not, if our knowledge is incomplete, we speculate. Yesterday we were talking about this for a moment. Every time that we have not enough information for understanding something, we speculate, we invent something that we think that exists. Yeah. Imagination. Imagination was the main method used by Einstein. It's not, it's well known about this, but his main idea was to try to figure out how the world would look like if he were riding a photon. How should it be possible to see the world in this way? Stephen Hawking uses it a lot yet. He tries to imagine things. There is two ways of using imagination. And Richard Feynman, American physicist, explained these two ways. One is just to create worlds, like Arthur Clarke, like Jules Verne. They just put their imagination working and they began to think how the world could be. This is one way for writing stories. The other way is try to imagine something concrete that can be verified by experiment. When the person is able to imagine in scenario concrete that could be verified, he's doing science. He can make an experiment and he can verify if it's working or not. Currently, to imagine is a very important way. Let me sit here. A very important way to create knowledge. It's, I don't know if you know IDEO. IDEO is the most famous company here in the United States for designing products. They have, it's impressive how productive they may be. They say that if they produce 100 ideas per hour, they are well. If they produce less than 100 ideas per hour, they are weak this day. Okay, they are not in good conditions. If they reach 150 ideas per hour in brainstorming, they say that's a great day. The idea is how to generate more ideas in less time. The best way to have a great idea is to generate a lot of ideas. The great ideas is not the result of a genius impulse. The great ideas is the result of hundreds of intents of generating ideas. Edison said that he didn't fail 3,000 times. He just found 3,000 ways of not doing things. Okay? And for discover the lamp, he made 5,000 intents. At the end of 6,000 intents, he achieved to create the lamp. So the effort for generating ideas is a very, very important way of generating knowledge. And for most of our work, as professional in this case, to be able of generating a lot of ideas is very important, really important. Never to work with just one or two ideas about what we are doing. To have a lot of ideas. I have my first idea, I discharge it, and I try to have a second one. Once I have my second idea, I discharge it, and I try to have a third one, different from these two. When we reach 6, 7, 8, 9, we have a portfolio of ideas that we, after that, may combine all these ideas and generate a new, much better than any one of these. It's a very important way for generating knowledge. Okay? Scientific method. This is Galileo Galilei, 17th century. He almost died for this. Okay? What's particular of the scientific method is that I use the experiment for verifying a theory. This is the particular. Before Galileo, people used experiment for verifying ideas, concrete ideas, but not for verifying theories. The question is that after the moment that Occident invented the scientific method, the development accelerated. The path of innovation is much greater. My idea is that it's the most important cognitive innovation, single cognitive innovation someone may have made, because it enabled people to do a lot of different things by themselves. They improved the way we are able to think, the way we are able to work with this method. Our lives now are organized by this method in many ways. It was so powerful that many people thought that it was the only way to produce knowledge, and began to devalue other methods for knowledge generation, for the importance of this one. Yeah? Okay. The scientific method try to have an idea and hypothesis, imagine an experiment, to do the experiment, and to verify the results. When I do the experiment, I am changing something. I put two things together, okay, and I will see what happens. But with humans, it's not possible to do this kind of things. We cannot do experiments with humans in most cases, no? And in society, it's also impossible, not only with individuals, but in society, it's impossible to make social experiments. Okay? The social experiment that some people have made have had a very high social cost. And in most cases, impossible to do an experiment. We construct a model in our mind, we project implications from this model, and we try to find these implications in reality. So we get data from the reality, how it is, not how it changed with our experiment. It's a bit different between the traditional scientific method of natural science and the statistical analysis. I don't know if it's clear for you. If you want, we can talk about this difference. In natural sciences, we make change in the object of our study. In statistical analysis, we design a model and we just look how things are without any action of change from us. Okay? There are some cases in economics where it's possible to make experiment at the same way as in social science. But in this example I am trying to bring here is when we just observe what is happening. This is a very different approach, really different approach. It's the most different thing I saw for many years. We were thinking about scientific method, statistical method. Everything, every way we had an idea, an experiment, and the verification of this. In this case, we have no experiment. We have no intervention. This method, it's an approach. It was developed by Nonaka and Takeuchi. They develop tools for managing companies, cognitive tools, and they analyze that we have a lot of tacit knowledge in our minds, and they say that, for example, if the best way to learn to drive is to sit at the side of someone who is driving. The best way to learn to cook is to cook with someone.
A good one.
A good one. Okay? So, when we are learning doing something with another person, there is a transference of knowledge, but tacit knowledge. It's useful to talk, but we can learn without talking. Okay? Just looking how the other person works, we can learn. And so we can transfer knowledge between one to the other. It's what he knows, he says, socialization. Yeah? Just.
Doesn't it depend a little bit on what the task is? Certain types of knowledge? Do you think that the ones that you were talking about were more physical things that you can really watch? If it's something like writing a paper, it's a little bit harder to...
But for learning a language, it's almost the same way. Okay? I am listening, a person talking the other language, okay? He's not explaining me the grammatics of his language, and I am assimilating in some way. I'm creating my own grammatical rules. It's most easy to see this in skills, in practical activities, but in abstract one, it happens too. It's okay? It may be abstract. Yeah? Most of the cases is we learn to think without the person. Talking with another person, we capture the way this person is thinking, and we begin to think the same way never talk about this way of thinking. Okay? But there are skills. There are skills, physical or abstract, maybe skills in these two kinds. But socialization is when I transfer tacit knowledge to the other person as tacit knowledge, as a practical way of knowing things. Yeah?
What if that person that you are socializing with is willing to teach you something? Is that also tacit?
Yes.
Knowledge.
The question is
I mean,
if
if there's an intention, or if it's just
okay.
intention of teaching something.
Yes, I understand. The intention is not the key in this relation. The person may intend, but if he doesn't know my idiom, he just will show me how to do things. He's intending, okay, but he's not using words. When I express my knowledge through words, I am expressing explicit knowledge.
The reading that we gave you yesterday describes this method in detail.
The question is the cognitive process that is happening. If I am observing something occurring in practice, I am assimilating tacit knowledge. Okay? I may be able to abstract in this moment. I may be able to create explicit knowledge in my mind. Okay? But the knowledge that is being transferred from one to the other when we are looking the other person working is tacit. If he explains me some rules about why he's doing, he's introducing explicit knowledge in this transfer. Okay? It makes it easier, no?
Right.
It enriches the relation, the learning process. No? It's very hard to assimilate tacit knowledge without any kind of help. No? But the mother's cooking in their house and the daughter with her, they are not talking much about cooking. The mother is giving instruction, do this, do other one, look this. Okay? Most of the time, what are being transferred are skills. Okay? Without symbols in the mind about these skills. This is socialization. The other method, the other modality is when I try to transfer a skill to words, to symbols, to representations. When I construct representations of my knowledge. Anytime I am able to go into my mind to identify a knowledge I have there and to express this knowledge in some way, I am externalizing knowledge. I am doing tacit knowledge explicit. For example, when I tell a story. The first exercise you made in this course about the learning process was an effort for making tacit knowledge explicit. Okay? You have had to come back to your experience, to reconstruct the experience, to remember, to find it in your brains and to put it in symbols in the sheets of paper. You were externalizing knowledge. It's a very powerful way to generate knowledge, because if I have my knowledge only tacit, I need to be with the other person for showing what I know. If I am able to put my knowledge in words, in symbols, and in a sheet of paper, then this knowledge may be transferred to a lot of people. The invention of first of all, the invention of the language was an effort for making tacit knowledge explicit. It was the main invention 50,000 years ago, no? When people was able to explain with symbols, with sounds, the ideas they have in their minds. It was a great leap forward in the humankind. The second leap is when they were able to write this down. So it will last more time. And currently we have, each time we are able to create an idea, we can put it in internet and we can transfer it to a lot of people. To transfer knowledge from tacit to explicit improves our capital, our knowledge capital. We can use much better when we have this in symbols in our mind. And we can put it in the physical receptacle. Most of we know when we are working, most of we know in our social relations, most of what we know in general, we have it in tacit level. To put it in explicit way is always a form to capitalize the knowledge we have. The third thing is what we are doing today. We are sharing explicit knowledge. I'm not making an exercise this moment, I am just talking. Okay? My effort is to transfer explicit knowledge, and you are processing what I am saying, combining with your own background in the field you have. So this moment, all you are combining explicit knowledge as you are listening me. Okay? The fourth component is internalization. Is after I receive the instructions, I go to the snowboard and I try to apply the instructions. At the moment that I transfer explicit knowledge in skills, I am internalizing the knowledge. And according to Nonaka and Takeuchi, it begins a new cycle. They say this as a cycle, but it may be understood also as different process, because we not always use the cycle completely. We use different moments. Okay? It's not beautiful, the figure. Okay.
We have it on there.
Okay. Great. Yeah. I don't know if you know this guy, this Stephen Wolfram. He considered himself a great genius, one of the most great geniuses of the 20th century. His opinion about himself. What he made, he created a language for software, and he created a software with this language. And with this software, he created models. He calls these models cellular models. It's what he does is that he has a group of instructions, like a DNA. He makes some change in these instructions, and he begins to look for variations in the form. It's very interesting because he was able to reproduce almost perfectly the form of leaves of trees, the form of crystals of snows, the forms of the figures in the snails. So he is almost sure that he have found some of the rules of nature with this program. And his idea is that DNA and the kind of program he's drawing works the same way. It's very important because we are trying to understand how the DNA works. And he has models for doing that. He has some book. One is Mathematica, and the other one is new kind of science. If you want, you can go to his webpage and to read something about him. For me, it's a very
What's his name again?
Stephen Wolfram. Wolfram, Wolfram, Wolfram. It's a good example of modeling. How much we can go forward with modeling is the idea of him. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I forgot to talk about two other ways of modeling. One is for forecasting. We can forecast the evolution of the economy. We can forecast the weather, things like that. All this works with modeling, okay? Or we can use modeling for experimenting. we create a model, we project implication of this model, and we go to the field to verify if this model is working. And if we find difference between we have forecasted and what we have found, we go back to our model and we change the equations of this model. We introduce new variables, okay, and we go back to the experiment. So the modeling is a tool that we will use much more in our scientific work. Reframing.
Can I?
Yes.
So I'm trying to understand modeling. And when you talked about experimenting, for me it took me to the scientific method. And so, but it combines a scientific with a statistical.
Yes.
So it's a statistical scientific.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay? I am separating for describing the particularities of each one, but we can use them combined. Okay? Yeah, reframing. Reframing is when I understand things in another way. The most interesting example is about the increasing of criminality in New York. At the beginning of the Clinton government, the criminality was increasing in New York, and everyone was highly concerned with that. There was a lot of explanation, anthropological, economics, geographics, the level of concentration of people in some areas. But they have explanation, but they had no solution to the problem. And suddenly the crime begins to go down. And a new wave of explanations arrived about why the crime declined in New York. The most known is of the mayor of the city, who explained that he have had very good strategies with the police, and they was combating the crime, and they were very effective. But the two guys who wrote Freakonomics, I don't know who. The other Steve.
The other Steve.
Okay? One from Harvard and the other from
University of Chicago.
Chicago, no?
Yeah. It's at Chicago.
Interesting. They have some conversation in Harvard with when tried to present his thesis, no? And for this reason, I was assuming that he was from Harvard. And they made a statistical analysis about the correlation between the abortion and criminality. They made this study here in the United States, in Romania, and in Germany. And they found that the main reason for the reducing in the criminality was that 20 years or something like that years ago, the Supreme Court decided to liberate abortion. And so the people who could be criminal in the future began not to get birth. And this was the main explanation they have. So it's a very good way for reframing. Some people was reasoning about what to do for reducing criminality. And their approach was the production of criminals. How was reduced the producer of criminals? Very different ways for understanding the same problem. Reframing is when we go from one form to another form. It's not always easy to do this. It always generates a bit of chaos in our mind for a while. We see some explanation to go down, to dismantle itself, and we need to see another way to understand. We have not anything in our mind for a while, and after a while things reorganize in our mind again, and we have another way for understanding the same kind of problem. When this happens, this is reframing. Huh? Let's go back. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah. I have two more. One is conceptual innovation. The last day of the day before the last day of this course will be about this. The conceptual innovation is much powerful than reframing. Reframing is just, I am changing my pieces in another way. I'm putting my pieces in another way. I am changing the logic I am using for analyzing a problem. But I am using basically the same concepts. Conceptual innovation is when I invent a new concept, that this new concept produces a reframing in itself. But it's much more powerful because this new concept may be used in a lot of different cases. For example, no? The invention of scientific method is a new concept. It's not only to rethink the empirical method that there was before. It's a new way for reorganize everything we are trying to do in knowledge. The work of Lavoisier when he created chemistry. Do you know, at that time chemistry and alchemy was much mixed. Okay? The work of his life was to create a method that should help people to separate these two kinds, and he created a new science with this. The idea of tacit dimension of knowledge we are talking about is a new concept. The idea that we know something that we are not able to explain what we know. We are not aware that we know, and if we are aware in some cases, we are not able to explain what we know. This is a new concept. This changes our definition of knowledge. Okay? This transforms many things. The concept of reflective practice of discourse. Yeah? Finally, I am finishing. Design. The design in itself is something that has a lot of knowledge embedded in it. When I see a building that have been drawn, it's not only a piece of art, it's also a lot of knowledge about the structures, about the spaces, about luminosity, about functions. So to design is a way to aggregate knowledge around an object. It's a very powerful method for generating knowledge we have. Okay? And the effort of Sean was to apply this approach of reflective practice in designing, in architecture and in general, was his main effort. Okay, I think that it's enough. Okay? Yeah.
Seems like you had some story.
Yeah, I think I'll wait though. This is
So,
yeah, this is an option.
too much? Yes, too much. Okay. Yeah. what should we do? We prefer to have now a break, and now after that exercise, we would like to talk about this a bit. What do you prefer?
I have a question.
Yes.
Here, when you talk about socialization, I have kind of, because I think all the other ways that you explain are also ways of socializing. So I don't understand exactly what is, I mean, in my opinion, the word is not, for me, socializing is all these four different things.
Yes.
So I don't understand exactly how you...
I don't know why he put this name, socialization. Perhaps because he didn't find better ways. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I say something to this?
Yes.
Yeah, what I think about that. When you say socialization, it means that something with you, something outside of you, but with you. When we are studying this one, actually we are socializing. Even if we are alone, we are socializing with physical things.
Yeah.
So we are learning to hear. These are now explicit to us in hand, and when we read those, they can be tacit, but when we learn it, it becomes explicit and we take it. And it starts with socializing, communicating with people through this one. So when you say socialize, I understand communication with outside of the things or people of us. That's what I understand.
That's what all the others are.
Yes. I don't know the origin of the word in Japanese. It was translated from Japanese to English. Okay? And people who made the translation found the word socialization for the word in Japanese. Okay? But I understand that socialization is for much more things than the transfer of tacit knowledge to tacit knowledge.
But I think, like, compared to the other methods, which are actually very systematic, and like you kind of have a definition of what the problems are and how to proceed and how, you know, because that's what scientific methods basically are. I think socialization is basically something that's not as systematic as science is. It happens in the way you interact with others. Like, you know, you actually acquire a knowledge even in the interaction with others without, not necessarily what they say, but what they are not saying. It happens in the interaction, and I think that is what socialization is all about. So that's why they say, like, media is a very powerful or potent medium for socialization, because there's things it says, but it's more of what it does not say, actually, that people can actually interpret, or, you know. And I think the one very good example for socialization is parents and kids. You know, when they say, I have this way back when my professor used to say that learning is not taught, but it is caught. Yeah. So I think that's what socialization is all about. It's catching, actually, like, you know, kids, you tell them what they do, they don't follow, because they actually are doing what you're doing. You know, it's like you say, adults, be careful of what you do, because, you know, that's why it's so. I find this very amazing now, because when I observe kids, it's children of colleagues, like 2-year-old, 3-year-old, and they kind of like absorb like sponge. You know, they imitate what you say, you know, and all that. I think this is what the context of socialization.
Even if they don't know how to speak, they would.
Yes.
They would get something from what is
and
happening.
And suddenly you catch them like saying something, and you said like, it seems like I said that, or that's the way I say things, or it seems like that's the way I behave, or what, and all that. I think this is what the whole context of socialization is all about.
It's almost like mimicry or fads, right?
Yeah, but it's more like it reflects that the kids actually are are intellectually learning, you're not saying it, but they're actually intellectually learning what, they're not able to figure it out, but they're able to absorb, what you are not saying.
Yes, it's the use of the word socialization. I think that should not be a problem. Let's work with the definition they are using for socialization. We know that in general socialization means much more than that. Okay? Another comment? It was, yeah, okay. The exercise we should do today. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. The idea is that we could create groups and we could analyze some of these ways of knowledge generation. We have sought some possibilities with you, and we have materials for one case. You have the possibilities we sought yesterday? Can you?
Okay, so the idea is all of you have had contact with many of these different forms of knowledge generation. If you separate into groups of 4 and choose one form of knowledge generation that is of interest to you, that you've experimented with in the past, that you'd like to analyze. You can choose design, or you can choose scientific method, the CESI method, modeling, and so I think at this point maybe what would be helpful is to know if you would like, if you could choose a model, a form that would be of interest to you. So if you form groups, maybe we count 1, 2, 3, 4. It would be 3 groups of 4. So
what if we organize groups based on what people are interested in discussing, so that then they don't get into those random groups and
that
all
would be
argue
good.
over which people want to talk about?
Okay, that works. So, how would you propose to begin to form the group?
You just write the things up on the board and then look up to them and go out and put them.
Okay.
What if few people propose them?
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so let's.
We have materials for design. We took from the book of Sean a case of design, some structures of this case, and we have this material. The other cases you should be able to
Use your own material.
yes. Design, modeling, CESI. If someone selects CESI, should select one of the 4 possibilities, because it's too much.
Not necessarily, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, if they want. Okay. You have the other?
Sometimes it's the second. Statistical analysis could fall under the model.
Okay. Yes.
And the task is going to be to just discuss it and come up with reflection on it, or is it going to be a...
The idea should be, one, to describe its main characteristics, in which cases it may apply, in which cases I cannot apply this method. And for people who works in developing countries, requirements too is very important. requirement for using the method.
And it's describing a specific, work with a specific case first when you're analyzing the method. So if you're working with modeling, for example, and you've taken QR or whatever class and you've had to do some sort of modeling assignment or econometric assignment, something, analyze it first with something concrete and then answer these questions. Would anyone object to taking this off since we're working with just 3 groups?
But there are others, right? Why did you
Yes,
choose
the other
just
one.
those 4 ones?
We have to start somewhere. We have to choose 3.
Okay.
So, which 3 would you like to choose? Which of the are these 3 of interest to you, or would you like to work with another one?
Perhaps they have a different reframing. Okay.
Reframing design.
Reframing. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else that's not on here that's of interest to people?
Reframing.
Anything else? Any other one that you'd like to see up here?
I think conceptual innovation is related to retraining also, right? No.
It's similar, but it's a bit more radical.
How can you think about reframing without thinking about conceptual innovation?
I can reframe with the same concepts I am working with. Yeah?
Anything else you'd like to add? Okay, so maybe what we should do now is just sign up and let's see what happens. Just write your name down.
Yeah.
And which one you'd like to focus on.
You're done? I don't want to do this.
Yeah, so you have other 4 options.
Chris, we're going to do reframing.
Okay.
Let's make a break now, and we will begin the exercise after the break. Okay? Yeah.
Like a summary of a conversation, and 3 chart papers. One chart paper has just a description, can be graphical, it can be written, whatever. of the example that you analyzed. The second chart paper has like a summary of the responses to the questions, the analysis of the methods based on the example, and then the last chart paper has answers to questions 3, 4, and 5. And you have half an hour. I have
They join us. Yeah.
And the developer.
Try to reframe
Is
it,
there
but
any
because
for the topic?
like kind of matching the
You're from Care Company,
Yes, yeah.
and what do you do there?
What do I do?
What the company does actually?
CARE is a relief and development organization. Emergency response and development in 4 countries. Water and sanitation education programming, a wide range of programs intended to lift people out of poverty.
What do you mean by saying emergency response?
One of our strengths has been historically emergency response.
What kind of volcanoes?
In many cases, CARE's presence in a country began because of helping after a volcanic eruption or earthquake or
catastrophe, something like that. Yeah, I just thought about. I was, looking at some popular issues, and one is the actual life sciences, and I saw a kind of different thing that I didn't see anywhere. There are some companies, let me say, working on that. The people who might have immediate, access to the others for their health concerns, are registering their name to some companies, and they hold some button kind of thing. Usually the ones who has health problems due to old age or something else, but do not have access for calling emergency help, and they just push the button. Since they are previously registered there, the center immediately understand that she or he needs help and just go there in a very quick action. I thought that kind of emergency. It's not under your
not at all.
Catherine or something like that.
The
kind of things.
tsunami, we're international,
Tsunami.
not within the U.S. We don't do response within the U.S. So,
a suggestion, a concrete example of if it's of interest to you. It could be the process through which we learn to do the critical moment methodology. Because so much of it was in Caesar's head, and you've experienced it, I've experienced it, I think you've experienced it. So we've got, have you experienced the critical moments methodology?
Is that reframing?
Yesterday.
that's in what we did here.
Yesterday.
Yesterday, that's true. So if you want, that could be something that we could analyze.
You know what I mean?
Be involved much more through the process because we've actually gone through each of these stages. And if the knowledge promoters are here, they've also gone through the actual
Do we say just the development or the community itself, or the group itself?
That was a
Because
suggestion.
before, in the past, this was a group.
I think we're in the process of
This was
suggesting,
a
right?
race
Right.
with
For deciding.
one.
I didn't have any suggestion. In my mind, it would have. I was thinking along the line of something a little less.
Everything is going.
Well, you say concrete example, but a little less concrete. Because to me, the SACE cycle of knowledge generation is not so intentional.
Now,
Perhaps,
all this
that.
Yeah.
I don't want to
I don't think this was intentional either. It was like, how do we learn to do this? To learn to
Oh, so,
listen,
yeah.
art listening.
Okay.
Because if you're trying to help people tell, like, make explicit their tacit knowledge, like, how do you learn to do that? Caesar is very good at it, but he can't tell you how he does it. A lot of it, he can't tell you. So it's the process of observing, of asking him questions to get him to start telling you know, or us observing and writing it down and then going to him and being like, is this what you do? And then him trying to be like, oh, actually, this is what you do.
No, that's, it's fine. You're not against the suggestion. I just hadn't gotten there.
So you guys know each other.
So maybe somebody else has comments.
Did you have something in mind that you wanted to take a concrete example?
No, I was thinking of much.
know exactly when the construction will start, and then attended up well. So
Everybody will apply the old experience and the area of proficiency.
when
I think that
Or
whichever
commonality with
example
the
we choose, you will have your own experience.
Because we were talking to
Draw from your own questions and then analyze the content.
so when we spend
so-
it down with it,
So
that is
one of the reasons I wanted to
I will
is because of that.
be able to
Or the concept
go
of design from your
from one's experience, will the others be able to follow the other?
at least to keep
That's the point. We have to choose one concrete example.
doing
in the
or
business.
concept.
From my point of view, just like you, for example, that I'm already working on so soon actually. Yesterday there was a president's speech on that as well. Generation of
Physical design and much more on the psychological.
How can we, because we can, how can we foster the development of renewable energy sources within, let us say, United States, so perhaps global? That can be my suggestion.
Yeah. Have
And then,
you used this method
I believe that
to look at the issue?
I only did not for that, but we can apply here, I guess.
I don't know that there's much socialization in it.
And I will provide you some information, so it will be socialization. I really don't mind. But there might be other ideas that we can work with.
It's
They do a little bit maybe, but they don't.
well, we were trying to do something where
Common to
we
us.
had
It's not a lot of post-occupation
where it had been
evaluation,
applied,
planning, right?
and we're analyzing
Yeah.
the impact of the application of that. And we don't have, because we only have half an hour. If we have to apply it, then we won't be able to analyze it. And
That's why I'm here.
so we need to start with something where we've already applied. So if you already applied this model on that
No,
issue,
just, I thought it was a little quick, but just perhaps we may find a better suggestion.
okay.
I described it. Okay, actually, I'm going to need some help describing. I mean, describing what just happened.
I think the process is the way easy architecture school works, or planning school, is that
So do you want to
people
go
kind
forward with that
of,
example?
they get a
or-
site, and then
With this-
they start,
the
like a student will
reflective practice?
stab at it, just doing this.
The one you
Yeah.
suggested?
Like, first they go understand the stuff.
I don't know.
Presumably there's some sort of programmatic.
Oh, no, I'm.
Well, it's a process, they still
But I'm not familiar with this.
Dimensions.
I mean,
Yeah.
Some of the
we can talk
Well, physical
about
dimensions
so I
are
don't
mental
know.
dimensions.
Yeah.
I don't want to think
Fine.
So let's explain this to
The
you.
assumption is a set of parameters.
In the model, you've got 4 stages.
It's very hard
And then
to
a
say,
challenge for.
and especially.
And objective.
It's a cycle. Often you don't necessarily
Sometimes. In
cycle.
theory, one would have
But
to
the
be
first
objective.
part
Well,
of
it
the
could even
cycle
just be a
is when you
residential
go
unit. I mean, it
The
would be more complex.
participation of the involvement, all those kinds of
from
So
tacit
then,
to
the
tacit.
student, does a
Someone's
You're giving
tacit
us,
knowledge
you're
is
giving us
transferred
to
to other
It
people.
could very well have to be
Yeah,
The
usually.
next
you
stage
have
is externalization, where explicit knowledge,
even though now the town does have some.
sorry, externalization is where the tacit knowledge, people try to explain, make explicit the tacit knowledge. And that's a process of externalization. then is the combination of where the explicit knowledge is discussed with explicit knowledge and is combined. And lastly is this process of internalization, where this explicit knowledge you actually begin to internalize.
The way these classes are usually structured is every week or every 2 weeks they'll be designed for
Yeah, I was thinking on a much smaller scale.
or maybe more senior students.
I'm thinking about basics of human behavior. Unless they're feral in the wild, alone in the world at infancy, people are socialized, and you're socialized from the time that you're born. And then somebody has to explain to you, we don't do that, we do this, and it's very varied what gets done culturally. But there are rules of behavior and standards of behavior and cultural behaviors that have to be explained to individuals, whether adults or children. And then you blend that together with what you already understand about human beings and yourself and what's being expected of you. And then you just begin to internalize those things. And they become sort of your personal cultural norms.
You can call that reframing.
And I don't mean it on some profound level, like, the imposition of rigid cultural norms or rigid religious beliefs. I don't mean it like that. Like, you have to wash your hands before you come to the table, and when you talk to people, you look at them, things like that. I was just thinking on a much, 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 much smaller scale, much littler. So I'm happy to go with either of them.
Not doing that.
In this case, I think we'll be able to bring in, for example, analyzing each of these stages. You have like tacit to tacit. It's the tacit to tacit generally happens through observation. So if we're talking about knowledge related, knowledge that Ceasar had about how to help people reflect on their work and make their knowledge that they've generated through their work. This is some tacit knowledge that he has about how to do that, how to get people to begin to identify the knowledge that they have from their experience.
We want you to reinvent the scooter for us.
So
they didn't have enough research,
and
some of them was not qualified.
I watched him
somehow solve the last mile problem.
Because
he started to develop this methodology to help people do that. So that's in a way like already making it explicit, but then actually applying the methodology the way he does it. There's a very big difference between when he does the methodology and when I do it, and follow a guy who doesn't have as much experience. So I just remember we would watch him, and I would take notes.
At moments do you need to have
and not only
and then I would go to him with my notes, like, this is what I saw you do. This is what you did.
Why not?
Or I would sit down with him and then start going. We did a guide, step by step, what he does.
So that's the externalization piece.
That's the externalization. Like step by step how he did it. But even better, the way he brought stuff to come out. Because then I would watch him based on this guide, and he would be doing much more than what was in that guide, even though we spent like 5 hours writing the guide step by step, and even yesterday when I watched him do it, he described more things than he had described to me before, So
it's always a trade-off.
So
think about these broad abstract terms, and
but then there's so I guess that that combination part where the explicit is combined with the explicit. I guess that's the part where we're discussing. I have a piece of paper
I think the problem was
and I'm describing, and we're discussing what I'm seeing, he's doing, and there's this explicit to explicit.
Well, what I understood combination is that we take what we know already and combine it with what he knows and is externalizing. Because in my way of thinking, the learning, knowledge transfer, whatever you want to call it, happens when I combine information that's being externalized. Because it's not knowledge per se, it's information when it's given. It's information. When I combine it with information I have from my experience, then I internalize it as knowledge. That's not, to me, it's not knowledge for me until I get to this point. You know? So, I mean, I now know what reflective practice proposes, but I don't know it. I couldn't, I haven't internalized it to the point where I can use it. I mean, I'm somewhere in between these two stages with this process.
So the internalizing would be to actually do it.
And to incorporate it into my thinking to the point where I own it. It's the way I understand it.
And you're not even really thinking about it anymore.
Right.
If you're skiing or you're snowboarding, you're riding a bike, you aren't thinking about that. It's just part of the fluidity of action. Like once you can walk, you don't think to yourself, okay, bend, place, balance, bend, place, balance. You just don't think that. So, yeah, and the other...
It becomes a habit.
I think,
you know, I'm going to when I hear new information, it's more than the critical moment. That's not the.
It just becomes part of how you. It becomes part of your active cognition. You're not thinking about it anymore. It's just.
It'll become a habit of what I do, that I reflect on what I've learned. And if we're talking about, we have to decide what our concrete example is. Is it the reflective practice or is it critical moments? I mean, because to me, critical moments is a method of reflecting. So,
maybe it would be better to expand this to reflection, because then we can all we all have experienced some practice, right?
Design, I was thinking like, okay, product.
That could be our concrete example.
But even in that case, I mean,
it doesn't make a mayor
Does it sometimes happen that in your daily life you are doing something just as a habit?
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes you see some other people doing the same kind of thing with another habit or another way. And do you catch them that, oh, it's better than what I'm doing, easier or more? Does it happen to you? And then does it happen to us that why don't we change our way of doing that to make it better, to make it more comfortable? So does it work with that one? Then we combine what we see in a reflection moment, and we just get the idea, combine it, and then think about it and take out something that previous passage, take the other one which was perceived and we took it immediately and we make it our new passage.
Yeah, so learning to do that.
Yeah. So strength must be based on observation or participation.
And I guess it's hard to say
some of the strengths
in the environment, even if we are randomly a part of it, while we are maybe observing around or deliberately we are in there like we are here. To learn the same thing.
It is more efficient to narrow to limit the
Maybe they don't want to develop them in a way.
Who are you talking about?
The combination project, the combination portion, rather, is really interesting because although we're all in the same class and we're all listening to Ceasar talk, everybody's absorbing the information differently because we all come to it with a different educational background, a different personal philosophy, a different worldview. you know, as similar as, you know, as similar as our politics may be, or our sensibilities may be, or any of those things. Everybody just comes to it differently because you're individual, you know, and so we're all absorbing different pieces of the information, and you hear it differently.
Especially with this last project I was working on, it can be very easy to kind of
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so
once there's kind of something drawn.
It's based on, it depends on what experience, what background information you bring to the group. I mean, you know, since I sat through the critical moments exercise in Atlanta, I have a different, I'm hearing this with a different lens. You can hear with the lens, but, you know, filter than someone else in the class who's never heard of it before, never seen it practiced. So I had an assumption of where we were going with putting our little pieces on the board yesterday. And I, you know, had experienced that before, so I had some assumptions that I came in with. That to me is, you know, combining this with a set of information that's different. So what you're
But likewise, even if you repeat the course once a month for the rest of your life, you're always combining the information differently.
Exactly.
You know, what is it? You never step into the same river twice, right?
It's kind of an inverted.
Yeah, and on the flip side, you know, Breton says, the eye does not see what the heart is not prepared to comprehend, right? And it's the same thing with your brain. You can't see what you're not prepared to comprehend, or don't have the capabilities to. I mean, what a 2-year-old can comprehend and what a 40-year-old can comprehend are very different things. Just in terms of your cognitive development.
I think if you think about worldview and paradigm, there's also this, you need a lot of disconfirming data before you're willing to shift stuff and notice things that are outside your frame of reference.
You know, I mean, like, as a really trite example, I had a professor in college who his entire life was like a truly devout Catholic and was actually was in the in the seminary intending to enter the priesthood. And he said one day he woke up and the following thought came to him: what if there is no God? And he had this total crisis of faith and left. He's still a practicing Catholic, still believes in God, but it was just the idea that could be true, that he could even conceive of it, pulled the rug out from underneath his entire life. I mean, so it's those sorts of things, like what are you prepared to comprehend, and what are you thinking about, and where are you trying to apply? I mean,
most overall, like maybe those buildings work as U-shaped buildings.
It's like almost modular.
So there's very much comes back this idea of like turn on paper, try it out, and then deconstruct it. Reconstruct it.
So you say that the strengths are maybe trial and error.
And by the time the was somewhat involved, it feels like a strength.
But it's just something to be aware of during the
Even at this point, it could still be.
And I think you're exactly right. I think that it takes a lot of rethinking and different kinds of information to make people shift. I mean, even little things, let alone your entire worldview. And part of that has to be,
common knowledge or common assumption.
oh, this sounds really bad, that you're thinking at all. You know what I mean? That you're not just going. And that at some level, for example, if you're engaged in this process, you're not there because somebody has a gun to your head. So you're at least thinking that I'm going to have to think about something, whether or not you believe you're entirely right. So
if you think of a classroom situation, being a teacher walking in with, you have, I mean, a knowledge of a language, which is my background too, and you know that that's what you're there to externalize, but, you know, you try to demonstrate a bit of it to bring the students on board. But teaching it or sharing that information with this classroom each one in there comes into the room with a different background of experience, or if there was a theory, schemata theory, which is each person brings their own schema, it's like a diagram of all the little pieces that you have that you're bringing in. Whether you've ever been to a Spanish-speaking country, whether you've ever watched Sesame Street, whether your grandparents spoke the language, all that combines in you, that you're bringing that information. So when you hear the teacher give this instruction, each student in there is going to attach it to different background information or schema. So
even if you have an entire classroom full of very similar backgrounds, none of them have ever been exposed. Simply neurologically, some come with more capacity for linguistics than others are going to come with. So how they're going to combine that, apply it, and internalize it is very...
Also attitude, that whole... So, and willingness, whether they're there and want it poured into their brain as opposed to whether you're an active participant in the learning process, is how they combine it is going to be different. So, but let's clarify our concrete example just for my benefit, if we could. Have we chosen the critical moments exercise, or have we chosen reflective practice? Because I think we're different. I'm not sure where we ended up on that. And if we're supposed to analyze the method based on a concrete case, so what's our concrete case? Is it the critical moments?
Really? We can choose maybe we should choose language-based framing.
Everybody went to foreign language class? Is that right? You obviously didn't. Have you been? Everybody was forced to go? Okay.
Who went willingly?
No, mine was not by
You know, security and all that other stuff. But,
we can, if it's too much to do like all 4 stages,
you know, whatever
we want to focus on just combination.
Where's the cover for the rain?
Internalization. Maybe do class 2. I don't know.
No rain.
Well, I mean, if you want to do the instruction and learning of a foreign language at the very basic,
the client,
most trivial point, well, not trivial even, is the tacit ability on the part of the teacher and the student to, everyone's neurologically wired for language. You have the capacity to learn it. And God knows some people just shouldn't teach. It's not, they just don't have the capacity for that. Not you, I'm sure you were fabulous. I was victimized by bad language teachers. So everybody comes wired. You have the tacit capacity and understanding of language.
Some have more of an aptitude than others.
Yes, they do.
Even if you think about acquiring your first language,
it's different.
The socialization part is you just, like, you're around people who are talking. You see words written down, you hear stuff from the people around you. People are trying to talk to you, or they're talking around you. And at some point, people start saying, that's a cat, that's a chair, that's a seat, that's a 7.
And even if they don't explicitly identify, you're just picking it up. They just do. Although I would argue that written language and the recognition of that as its own language is different.
Totally. The reading process.
Than how you're picking up a spoken language.
Yeah.
So all this was taking place.
But I guess that
There's a lot of
if it's design process,
language is so linked to culture.
Right.
But I think that
Although again, since everything is
And it's empowering. I mean, again, they ask the occupants, what do you think? And they express what they thought. And they're like, no, I'm sorry, it's an empty box.
So there was not
So why is that?
Well, idiomatic speech, linguistic understandings of, I have a friend who speaks like 6 languages, but English is not his first language. He came to me after a class, he was graduating from college, and he came to me after a class and he said, I was in class today and someone said, well, that's just grist for the mill. At which point the class continued, but he had no idea what that meant. And because the class had turned on him, he had no idea, like the rest of the class, half the class was wasted. He had no idea what had just shifted. And you don't think of it like that. So, and the other thing that goes along with learning to speak a language is learning.
So are we answering in which situations is this method useful?
What do they call that? Nonverbal communication. How in certain cultures, how close you stand to someone when you speak to them, whether or not you make eye contact with people when you speak with them, you know, how your body is even how your body is positioned to talk to somebody like this is very different than to talk to somebody like that. Just all those things that nobody ever says to you. If you want to show someone you're mad, cross your arms in front of you. Nobody ever says that. You just see people do that. You know.
Although there are attempts made to do that. I mean, we had a poster in our class of hand signals that you will see Spanish speakers make that have a particular meaning, and that if you do that, this is what it means, you know. So, but it, well, again, that even had to be defined because that's not true of every Spanish-speaking country, you know. So it's like, how do you externalize that? And that some things are very difficult. So,
yeah, I spent a lot of time working with children on the autistic spectrum. And, you know, this is a whole very specified portion of speech and language pathology, is how to teach people who are neurologically incapable of doing it how to read body language. And it's like, it is like, what they told me was like, it's like learning a second language when you're grown. That you will never be fluent in the language. You're sort of an immigrant into that, and you'll eventually socially learn how to get to the bus station or how to buy your groceries or how to ask someone directions, but you're never going to be fluid in that. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah, the learning of the language, how it's taught.
Actually, I think we are talking about expression by using the course more than a language itself. What we are saying, what we are doing, what we are meaning, and how we use the language.
A lot more abstract than
that's the thing that we are talking about, what I understood. More than...
Well, yeah, that's actually true. Because what you're looking at is how you use the language. And the externalization is how you're taught a language, I guess, foreign or not.
Any learning of a language, even if it's the first language, you're combining it with something. If you're a child and you're seeing people do certain things or hearing certain words, and you know that you heard that yesterday or the day before, then you're going to
But the externalization of that is, eventually you'll have someone who's going
the idea now is, what I would like you to do is to put what you have advanced until this moment to a paper for presenting people. It's not necessary to have the exercise complete for the kind of conversation that we will have later. So begin to put in a sheet of paper what you have produced until now. After that, each group will have 10 minutes for presenting this case, and we will talk about this. Okay? Okay, thank you. You can use 2 or 3 sheets of paper, try to context, to answer this.
I just hearing Sebastiao and since I know him, and I know that a year ago he didn't speak English, and he's taught himself basically how to do this. But I'm hearing the way he says use it, and it's that combining what he's heard and seeing, and the fact that we add ED. It's one of those things that you see when you're doing English as a second language. You know that you see that you add ED to any word to make it past tense. Kids will do it, young kids will do it too. They'll say I goed instead of I went, because they're generalizing something they have picked up tacitly.
I bring.
And
my particular favorite.
Yeah, well, or I bringed it. It's first they'll do the ED on the end because to do past tense you give ED on anything, and the pronunciation of it, the fact that there's a difference between used, instead of use it, and why do you do that, and how do you use it. But it's that's part of that process. So tacitly, he's picked that up, but no one has instructed it so that he can concentrate on those kinds of
even on more rudimentary levels. Like you go to second grade and they give you the vocabulary sheets. Here, look these up. And then you have whole new words. You start to, and like when they start to do roots of words, like Latin roots and Greek roots, you start to see a pattern in language that you haven't seen previously. All right, who's got good handwriting?
He just sits at his desk and types. He doesn't know.
Well, I can print, but
here you go. We have a winner.
Not necessarily well, but I can print. I learned that early on.
We always get bad colors. All right.
So,
what are we supposed to put on here?
We're supposed to answer the questions.
I don't like brown. Take the brown away.
I'll tell you, this one is a dry erase marker, which smells terrible. It doesn't write well on paper. There's a purple one.
That's actually a really nice marker. I used that yesterday. The black one and the fine print.
All right, so what are we supposed to put on here? I'll write until you tell me what to put.
so we had a couple of examples.
All right, I have too many things to juggle. I'm afraid I'm gonna knock my coffee.
One of the things we haven't talked about is in which situations is this method not useful?
So anyhow,
I just don't want to dump my coffee on somebody. When we put it down, I won't kick it over. Tell me what to write and I'll write it.
When has this worked for you?
So our topic was this.
Okay, so all right, so one, the concrete example we chose was it learning and understanding a language? Was that it?
Whatever it was.
language as a
You
tool.
were saying it's like...
It was supposed to be a foreign language, right? Or not?
Well, yeah, learning how to use language. Was that it?
Yeah.
Was that it? Okay. Thank you.
School where this process was developed by a person who wanted to apply it to design.
So the method based on the concrete case. What were the strengths of the method?
Great.
Strengths. Well, the strengths is that one of the strengths is that you're neurologically wired to do it.
Are we learning a language? Would you say in the classroom?
No, all of it.
Being in the
I
country?
think learning the language, period. I mean, whether it's a first language or a second language.
And it can be in the classroom, it can be formal training, it can be anything.
Extra efficient in our design.
Any of them.
Explain the design.
Being in a house where people talk hasn't changed at all.
My problem is saying that analyzing this method is that I think this is a way that we just normally learn. I mean, it's not like we choose to use this method. It's
No, but you use the method to expand your sense of understanding.
So what the strength is that it comes naturally.
Right, but you're neurologically born to do it. You don't, I mean, it isn't like some people can and some people can't. Barring extraordinarily extreme examples.
No, but I'm saying the method itself, the Ceasar method.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Yep.
So the strength of the method in general, right? Or do you not? Is that way it occurs naturally?
Millions of gophers.
No?
It occurs naturally, but if we're conscious about it, I think
Reframing
it's strength.
I'm good at that.
Okay, so what, so, okay.
If we know that, oh,
Alright.
this is observation,
next to
this
the-
task,
where-
this task,
whereas-
now I'm making explicit the task. By writing, you should.
Where's your box?
But I also, I'm also terrible at
Where's your box?
Okay, so to describe the example is to say that
We didn't talk about how people are learning English in class or in a place where they are naturally, they stay there in an environment. and how do they interact with the others, socialize, and then how do they see explicit knowledge and then take them in and then make it tacit.
Okay, so what do we want to say next? Number one is describe how it's used.
Well, I think whoever's reporting out would probably just say that. Demonstrate the strengths on each other.
We're trying to see if they opportunities.
Okay, tell me what's next then.
We could represent inside.
Well, I mean, one of the ways we could do it is actually just to draw a box and to put our examples within here. Make a grid. Here's our grid. We love our grid. So in the top box, which would be socialization, so then we would say, so you're neurologically capable, which is always helpful.
How do you spell neurological?
Spelling doesn't count.
Neuro.
We're talking about knowledge.
Right. Neurologically,
How does this method work for learning?
We will start
you're
with
wired
some
for it,
tacit
essentially.
knowledge,
And then
make it
the
explicit.
tacit knowledge is that you're in a household where people are talking.
Learning languages.
Right. Your tacit knowledge is that you're
So regular exposure.
regular exposure and that you're where some people are talking. And it does, by the way,
And
have
also,
to be people actually speaking to one another and responding, or it has to be people, neurologically this is true, it has to be people speaking to the child in question, because if the TV's on in the background, they don't pick up that language, because it's non-interactive, it's completely passive.
what about culture? Cultural dimensions?
Right, non-passive exposure. Okay, so the externalization is the refining of language.
I mean, it could almost be a loop between like the contract that says, oh, we can't quite do this.
And do you want to put under socialization, do you want to make a small third point that includes nonverbal communication, which is different all over the place?
Yeah, like
Facial
Body
expressions,
language.
yes, nonverbal expression. I should have gone to school to study autism. I should not be doing planning. I'm in the wrong place.
Well, I mean, those all qualify.
So externalization is formal refinement of language, right?
Because even if the resources that were there,
Formal refinement of language, including nonverbal.
Right.
Yeah, what we were saying is,
isn't that like acquiring the language? Because the
No.
combination is a form of refinement?
No, because what Jody says is, for example, when you have a kid who's learning to speak, and he says, I goed, and then you have somebody correct them. Formal instruction and correction. Because it doesn't have to be in a classroom. It can just be, like a mom saying, no, we don't say brang. And then they don't teach their kids that, and then I make fun of them. No, I'm kidding. Did I just say that out loud? Oh my God.
I was doing that.
Instruction and correction, externalization, instruction, correction,
The designer, the builder, the production technology, whatever that is.
and expansion, purposeful expansion of language. Whether that's in foreign language, better vocabulary.
How would you model
Capability of
skills, social skills.
I wonder if it's too late.
I don't know what we're doing.
Okay. And then the combination is what you know. It's what you know of your own. What you know of your own linguistic constructs combined with what you're being taught. I mean, for example, children who are taught English as a second language, who have not yet been taught the proper grammatical and structural constructs of their native language, can't ever learn either language. I mean, they struggle their whole lives because they don't understand the constructs in one, so they can't apply it to the other. And they're different. So you would say in that, you would say a combination of, combination would be what you, I don't know, it isn't a reinforcement, it's a coming together.
Well, if you take a class of kids that are all coming to school to learn English, even they're coming to school based on what they've done at home. Each one brings their own knowledge base.
Right, it's a
so you're taking in the instruction and combining it with.
It's a combination of your own knowledge base
language
with formal construct.
I think it's also
lack of involvement as a limitation too.
I'm not sure if the experts
individual knowledge base.
Right. Well, it draws on both the explicit and the tacit knowledge. Like a designer just kind of has a sense of how a space is going to feel, but there's also an explicit knowledge of what the climate in each area or sunlight or
what works for this soil that doesn't work for this one.
Yeah, so maybe you say embedded translates in tacit instruction.
I did say I could do it, but not.
And formal construct.
They're afraid of working together and all this because
you have a verb, you have a noun, you use a semicolon this way.
And of course, we also
Context.
A group of
So what would you, and you said something that it sounds like you wanted to add here, that, I don't know if it's there yet.
Which one?
Just now, what you were saying.
You know what,
About the
still I'm
combination.
thinking about that. Perhaps, suggestion, we should start with the S1. Words, the meaning of the words, the meaning of the expressions, something like that, which we can accept them as a knowledge. You say something, the words has some meaning, so it's a knowledge, and you say some other things together with that, when you combine, when you make a sentence or when you say some idiom, it means something. These are the knowledges. So I think we should go through them.
Sound recognition.
Sound recognition, it's language itself also.
But I think though what you're saying too is that in that S box there is a body of experience you have as a user of words. I mean, I'm thinking as a parent, and once in a while my kids will say a word that they don't know the formal meaning of, but they know if they say it, there's a certain reaction that we can give to them. So there is this way in which people use words and they discover what it means in context before sometimes they discover what it means in a formal, structured way, which I think sounds to me like some of what you're saying.
This is the regular exposure.
Well, kind of
It's not
bridges.
just exposure, it's experience with what happened. It's an experience of what words mean. Not just listening to other people.
Even if kids give you a word and they don't know what it means, then at that point they're looking it up, or you explain it to
Not
them.
necessarily. And I think it's, I mean, maybe what I'm talking about isn't the same thing as what Melissa's talking about. And maybe it's part of the internalization is the process of practicing and discovering by experience what things actually mean and how language actually works. Combine it, so it's, once you've gone,
Right. Exactly, because what you're doing is internalizing a way to manipulate the language so you can make yourself understand and understand others, both in written and
I can give you
verbal form.
a very short specific example which may clarify what I mean. When you say in English, you say sometimes no in order to approve and are you are not well, are you? When you ask. No, I'm not. Yes. But in my language, you are not well. Are you? Yes. Which means I'm not well. So my son is now learning English. So before he knows
She would say
Turkish
difficult to
movie.
change
Then
from
he
text.
learns that
I mean,
one
obviously, if your objectives
by
change, obviously
socializing.
it would change too.
And we see some people explicitly referring that when they say you are not. No, I'm not. No, it's not. He understands that. He combines with this one, which conflicts with the Turkish one. He comes back the other. When I'm in Turkey, I will say, yes, I'm not. Then I'm not. When he's in the United States or somewhere else, English is spoken, he will say, no, I'm not well.
The practice part comes in.
Basically, my final.
Because as you're internalizing the language, you're manipulating and finding a mastery of the language, probably in written form as well, but certainly in spoken practice, to make yourself understood and to,
And so what he's saying is you're creating,
So this would be practice.
Your way of
practice
expression.
and you're creating rules for yourself about when to use this, when to do that, how to
You should.
anticipate.
To correctly express yourself. When you are with the other group of people who will understand in that way, then you should say in that way. Otherwise, they will misunderstand.
yes, but by the time you're doing that, I mean, that's a combination of C and I.
Yeah,
Because when you're combining, he's combining rules of language and starting to break them down for himself very consciously. In Turkey, I do this. In the United States, I do that. This is how the language flows. But it's a very concrete thought process. When I said this, it was wrong. I was misunderstood. I didn't get it right. How did that break down? And this is how I'm going to move those around. But then as he's got that idea, he'll do it internally. It's not like every time he wants to express something in one language or the other, he'll have to stop and think about how he's going to break it down. I mean, maybe very occasionally.
Learning, I mean.
Right. But you become fluid. You become fluent in the language.
And you make it habit.
I mean, because I have friends who are bilingual and they say they never, if they're thinking in one language, they're thinking in that language. If they're thinking in another language, they're thinking in that language. That they generally never think in their brains, this is the paragraph I'm going to do when I speak, and I'm doing it in Spanish, and now I'm going to take that paragraph and translate it into English. Sometimes they do it when they're writing, but generally not. Yeah, exactly.
Somewhere in between, we're going to do.
Yeah, when you're learning in your learning period, you start with there and end up there. And when you settle it, that's okay.
But it keeps, specifically with language, it'll keep going around forever. You know, because you never truly master a language or have a fluidity in it.
As part of the practice is taking a bit of what you're doing,
in theory,
tacitly,
it opens that possibility.
and making your own rules and recognizing
The qualities.
But part of the internalization also is that in order to get along in the world in any way, shape, or form, you practice all the time. You're always thinking about it.
So what are the strengths of this method for learning a language, and what are the limitations?
Speaking of limitations, I have to go. It's nice. Thank you for letting me hang out with you.
Okay,
so the strengths are that you're born ready. I mean, this is a great method if you want to learn a language. If you wanted to learn a language, what are the strengths of this method versus another? Right? That the tacit knowledge is there. The capacity for tacit knowledge is there. At birth.
Everything. You have a context in there. There's a shared
Well, the strength is that
there's a
the first thing
specific
you
set of
said
objectives that you can sort of agree on.
that this is a natural method. It's natural. Strength is natural.
Right.
This method is natural. We do it all naturally. What
Capacity is natural. The capacity and the method.
The capacity to apply the method is natural.
Yeah, it's always effective. But especially effective.
We do it all the time.
There are multiple stakeholders dealing with the same issue.
So like what Nonaka has done is just make that method.
yeah, he just made it explicit.
Yeah.
It's all. I mean,
Exactly.
it's
Taking the
normal.
dictation.
And by making it explicit, it makes it possible for us to be more proactive in
Right.
our process. So, do we have other strengths, or do we?
I think that pretty much sums it up, because we're running out of time. Limitations.
And I think it's.
If you want to learn a language, whatever language you
Besides the language.
Well, but the limitations is that it requires a willingness on the part of the.
Well, and opportunity. You know, if you don't get to go to school, you don't get to go to school.
Requires
A new economic system like ecological design is a response to ecological degradation. I mean, it's obviously
practical
very different.
experience,
You know, in some ways.
right? I mean, I think there are requirements
No,
for
but
each
limitation of the method, though. Limitation of the method.
You know, we have context.
That you have to.
It requires you to experience.
See a problem and want to
Right. Build- I don't know.
Combination part, it requires
design
you to
something
have
in
certain
response to that
types
opportunity or problem.
attitude.
I don't know. I think that the limitation is in the externalization. That if you don't have the opportunity for externalization, that's it, you're done. Essentially, your language capacity will get where it's going to go. You'll have a very low capacity. You won't learn to read. Your reading, if it's good at all, will be limited. What you learn about the formal constructs of the language, how you put things into place, you know, just in speech.
Because I never learned formal constructs of Spanish. I just speak it.
When there's maybe
Miraculously, like it came from God, or were people around you speaking? There you
you have
go.
to first do the process.
I heard it as a kid.
No, but
But I
your
didn't
first language
study
was,
formal.
your first language was Spanish, okay, but, so it.
But you didn't have to.
I mean, that's the case in
I
anybody
can't tell you
learning
anything
language.
about how the word.
But the point is then telling you a shared frame.
But if I gave you a paragraph in English and said circle the verbs, you could do that, right? So presumably, in a bilingual situation, you can take the concept, this is a verb, this is a noun, and apply it. Oh, but you know, I don't know that in English. But you have had some formal instruction.
I
think that's not
Again, it's a part of the process of
You couldn't teach. Okay, I couldn't teach English either, but I can use what I know from having grown up with English to inform my teaching of Spanish.
So what I'm saying is that I don't think we need externalized Spanish.
No, but somebody along the way corrected you, not in English.
Right, corrected you in English or corrected you in Spanish.
Somebody, when you said, you know, used a
So you need opportunities for externalization.
Right, and they should, at some very basic level, in the ideal, would be formal.
Okay, and then the combination, you need attitudes or mindsets in order to be able to combine.
Okay, but that's true of any learning. The limitation of the method.
I would suggest one thing.
Yeah.
It's of the method, right?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Just
Method to our example.
I'm telling
The
you the
limitation
limitation of method.
to our
for
example.
example.
To our example.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay.
And
Okay, so
yeah, in combination.
opportunities.
For externalization, you need it. Without it,
But what they thought.
Your progress is limited.
Or opportunity.
on this side, right?
All right, jump, Musa. What were you saying?
I was saying that, from my example, there have been two different phrases that you cannot combine. You should set them aside and you should be prepared. Where are you? And how you should express yourself when you are in certain area. In Turkey, you should speak like this.
okay.
So you just put them together.
For a combination part, you need certain mental, like mindset or attitude in order to be able to like mindsets and attitudes.
What am I going to do?
I don't know.
I'm going to prime versus.
Because weren't you saying that if you just don't want to learn or you just...
See, I think in the case of like, I mean, for example, somebody once said to me in a training, once you can read, it's reflexive, you can't stop. Like, once you understand, like little kids, once they understand cat, dog, go, stop, words all around them come together.
You say you can't. I'm just going going for what Jody said about how important it was to have, an open mind, a positive
Yeah, no, I agree.
So mindset, attitude,
It's less abstract.
and play can
It's not
eliminate
experimental, right? You
certain
you can't do the same process.
If you're taking like your individual knowledge base with instruction and formal construct, and you're talking about snowboarding. If you're saying I can't do it, you can't do it. But you can avoid snowboarding your entire life. You can't avoid language your entire life. You're around it all the time.
No, because I have plenty of people. My stepfather's been married to my mother for 15 years, and he can't speak 4 words of Spanish. And he's taking classes, and he goes to Peru, and he can't say anything.
Can he understand going on around it?
Nothing.
But his attitude is good, so that's not the issue. So maybe it's aptitude. So maybe aptitude.
Practice is the other limitation.
But it isn't that they don't speak at all. And they don't speak English because they're speaking Spanish. Because it's
So
around
it's
them.
still opportunity.
Probably. If they're isolated.
But
Or
they're
if
not
they isolate
isolated.
by themselves.
They're not isolated. They're isolated on a very broad sense, but they're not isolated. They have families and they talk to people. They go to the grocery store. You know.
She's going to work there?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah, practice.
Yeah.
What were the other questions?
Where is it not useful?
For learning language?
But other situation, any situation.
when these limitations exist.
It would be harder to rotate them around.
Well, then
I'm going to have to think about that.
no method would work.
And useful when it's useful all the time.
Always, yeah.
So maybe write that down. And I don't know.
I can use a whole other sheet of paper.
See, that's a perfect example. Whole nother is so grammatically incorrect. But we all love it and use it fluidly as a country. But if you had come from a different place and somebody said whole nother, cognition of language is such a fascinating thing.
Oh, this is the
Sorry.
Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we have 15 minutes. So we will not have enough time today for doing everything we should do. We will finish tomorrow this part of the exercise. But I think that should be good to have time for each group talk about his experience, not talk about the exercise, not to describe the exercise because it will require some time, but talk about the experience. And tomorrow we will begin each group expressing their exercise. It's okay? Maybe may work this way? Because we have only 15 minutes. Or?
Another option is for one group to present.
Just one group to present today, and the other groups, wait, yes? Who will present today? In the order they have finished?
First come, first.
No? No?
First finish.
So we have 10 minutes for this group. So who will present of you?
Yeah, it's our turn.
Yeah, it's your group. Do you prefer to present today or prefer tomorrow? I can ask other group.
Yeah, okay, that's good today.
But I was going to ask, maybe it's more effective to very quickly have each group talk about the experience itself as you were originally suggesting.
I think so. So tomorrow we have a bit more of time. No?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about the experience. Each group can...
Go ahead, Chris.
So my name is Chris, for those of you who don't know me, probably most of you don't because I'm visiting.
just for today. This is the only session I could make. Suggested by the other Chris that I should buy, so thanks. What we were talking about in our group is the issue of reframing. And what we wanted to tease out here is what reframing meant in this situation presented by Yuma in Framingham, which is a place where a Brazilian community existed in the center of town, which was once, in some sense, an empty area, a ghost town, if you will. But then, as Brazilians saw the opportunity to make something out of it, they came in, started setting up their own businesses informally, in some sense, and began to develop the area. And soon enough, we had a community of lots of immigrants doing things like restaurants, shops, hair salons. Yet, another community, in this case of developers, came in and saw this area as undeveloped and wanted to develop it. So what we were trying to figure out in this issue is where was the reframing and what would it have done for the situation. And when we first started to describe the situation, we couldn't really get at the issue because we looked at it maybe as a situation where here we have a problem and there's some disconnect between the two communities. But once we started to see that maybe we could look at this situation from the perspective of goals, from common goals, then we started to see where the reframing actually was. Because we would describe a situation where she tried to get the stakeholders to talk together. And from that, we could see where was the changing in perspective that happens when you bring two people with different goals or seemingly different goals together, and what could the opportunity actually become once you get people talking together. So at the end, we saw the exercise as useful for actually talking about the way the situation changed or could have changed, and once we did that, we could look at the other questions here, limitations, strengths, based on what happened when we saw the situation as, hey, we have multiple stakeholders here, and reframing is about getting them to change their views and their visions based on what other people are talking about. So that was what the exercise did for us as we figured out what the method was about.
Thank you. Any other person of the group should say something?
Well, I think you made a very good, succinct presentation. I just don't know if other people will be interested in knowing about the limitations and the strengths that we identified. I don't know if that is useful now, or I don't think so.
I think, aren't we supposed to talk about them in detail?
Okay.
Okay, let's go to the other group. Your group. Design group.
Well, it was interesting because Renee was coming in as deputy director for Latin American Care. And so he was interested in sort of design, but from a more intangible sense, you know, in terms of policies, and he didn't really have much of a design background, whereas Ezra and I are both in the School of Planning, so we come more from that tradition. So it was interesting. We almost felt like we were helping him design his design framework, which was interesting, although, I mean, he had a lot of good ideas, and it wasn't like, I mean, it was a conversation, it wasn't like one way.
We have a very strange and skewed perspective on that.
Sorry. I mean, it was interesting. I almost felt like that was in some ways our context, was just thinking about, like, you know, if we're in Renee's shoes trying to design some sort of intervention or program someplace in some town or community in Latin America, you know, how would we go about the process of designing some sort of intervention? But then we also started talking about sort of the example that you provided, which was more of an architectural intervention on a, you know, thinking about some hypothetical site with some sort of hypothetical objectives. So I don't know if you guys have anything to add. No.
Okay, thank you. And the third group, who will present for the third group?
Why are you looking at me?
Why would we, kid?
There is so much. Okay,
we took the example of learning language, and we didn't separate it out in terms of learning foreign language, second language. We thought about it on a much broader scale, just the acquisition. A big part.
Computer language.
Yeah, I can't
Foreign
go there.
Wrong part of MIT.
That's down the hall. So, yeah, apparently you missed the memo. MIT divides neatly into two groups. There's can do the math and dusk. That's all you need to know. Unless you want to flip that around, and it's all of MIT and Sloan. So we looked at the example of learning a language, which turned out to be really interesting because it wasn't even really a question of tacit knowledge. You don't have to observe, like you're in it, you're neurologically wired for that. I mean, barring from this, yes, extraordinarily examples of neurological damage. But, not that that's not important, but for the general population, that you're born neurologically capable of that. And so we sort of went on from there. And it's really interesting because Musa's son is, his first language is Turkish, and he's learning English now. And how old is he?
8.
8. But he's starting to figure out linguistic constructs that are spoken constructs that are different. And like if I was in Turkey, I would say it this way, but in the United States, to get the same exact thing out, I say it this way, and the only thing you change is one word, like yes or no, and how you preempt the sentence changes. So how he's learning to do that, it turned out to be really, really interesting. And then how it goes around and around, and it didn't really stop. So it turned out to be an interesting thing, and we can talk about it a little more tomorrow.
Okay, we have few minutes. How do you see the day from the beginning? Any person could express his experience, his or her experience for this day, 9 o'clock in the morning and now 12 less 5 minutes. How did you see the day? How was your experience this? Don't be nervous.
I think it's always interesting to look at different models and how people are thinking, because occasionally, when you're trying to solve a problem, little or big, it's always useful to be able to think about it in multiple ways. Am I not thinking about this the right way? Am I not communicating this correctly? Are the people I'm communicating this to trying to tell me something and I'm looking at it one way, but they're expressing it a different way? And what am I missing? Where's the schism in this? So that it's always interesting to learn about how different people are thinking about things and how it's defined. And, because the capacity of the human mind is just incredible. So the number of things that can be working on a number of levels and the combination of these things that you can have is great. I do have to say, however, that I want to dissent from, or add to, I guess maybe is a better way of putting it, from the PowerPoint this morning. I'm not sure that I agree that the thing that's amazing is that human beings begin to make written language and symbols on the sides of caves. What I think is amazing about that is that in human development, they've gotten to a point where they have enough time and capacity that they are no longer just surviving, that somebody has 15 minutes to think about it, grind up, find a feather, and start that. That as a society, we have progressed at that moment to something where we are not just scraping by. Like that, I think it's the moment where we're no longer just scraping by that begins a whole different kind of thought. I don't think it's that's when people suddenly think I could write that down or I could make a picture. I think it's that suddenly there's just that instant where you can, because you have 5 minutes to do it. And the other thing that I think would be interesting is to include in the examples, you're looking at Lavoisier and Galileo. I think one of the examples that's starkly missing is Descartes and the pensée. because it's an interesting combination of all of those things coming together. So I missed Descartes this morning. So
Okay.
that's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Another comment? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if we should to describe the exercise tomorrow. What do you think about this?
I think I'd like to get into more details on everything.
Should be good.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we organize tomorrow for having time for doing this. Okay?